Welcome to Interview of the Blues. My guest tonight is a Boston-based blues musician whose music is daring, incendiary, and soulful style is a distinctive hybrid of the blues. Please welcome my guest, Peter Parcek. How you doing tonight, Peter?
I'm doing really well, Brother Greg. Thank you so much for having me. I am truly honored to be with you.
Thanks for
Thank you
stopping
for your
by.
kind words about my music.
Oh, well, hey, I love it. You know? Hey, I understand when you first started hearing the blues, it was on AM radio. What radio station were you listening to, and what year was that? And how old were you?
I was listening to a refrigerator-sized radio with a Godzilla-like antenna that I bought from Radio Shack, and it was stations like WVON, and I believe a station from Memphis, and I know that I heard the Hayride more than once, and I might have caught some of the Opry if there was a station that was carrying that. But the one that hit me the hardest, so that I had to go out and buy the records, was WVON in Chicago, and I was still in high school, so I probably would have been a freshman or sophomore in high school.
Understand that your mother bought you your first guitar.
She did.
Green
She,
Stand, I read.
my mother was a very creative, very unusual being, particularly for the time. Very mystical in a way, and very supportive of anything related to the arts. And when I bought these records, Best of Muddy Waters and Howling Wolf Moaning at Midnight, I said to her, you know, if I could ever learn to play the guitar, I'd want to learn to play with the feeling that's in these records. And I realized when I said it out loud, how impossible a mountain that was to climb. Because I had no idea what they were doing. I just knew that it moved me deeply. And she took me up on it. She said, you want a guitar? And I said, yeah, I'd love a guitar. I have no idea what to do with it. And she was working two jobs. My dad was not well, and he was absent a lot. And so she went to Green Stamps and bought me a beautiful nylon string instrument. And I hugged it a lot. I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know anyone who taught guitar, and we couldn't afford lessons anyway. But and this is before, the internet. I mean, I couldn't dial up a lesson with somebody. That just was out of the question. But it started there, and it wasn't the only guitar she ever bought me, as it turns out. She bought me a lovely Guild Starfire later, when I could play a little bit.
I understand that your journey as a musician, began in Middletown, Connecticut, listening to Muddy Waters and Howlin' Wolf and stuff, and your mom buying your first guitar. But I understand it really took off when you went to London, England.
That's
How did
true.
that all come about at that age?
Well, it came about from, it was precipitated by the Vietnam War. I grew up in a military family, and my dad was a Marine. My mom was in the Navy. She was she was considerably more understanding than he was of my point of view on the war. I was not a supporter of that particular conflict. And my dad did not agree with me at all. In fact, he could only see one way. He fought, I was going to fight, and that's it. And it was a pain. It became a very painful disagreement. And but bottom line, I wasn't going to go. And I actually applied to be what they call a conscientious objector. I began going to Quaker meetings. There was a Quaker group that was affiliated with Wesleyan University, which was in the town we were living in. And these were interesting people, and they introduced me to a way of thinking about the world that was quite a bit different. And so I applied for the CO thing, and then my mom worked as a teacher, and one of the fellow teachers had a husband who traveled internationally for business. And they had apartments in a couple of exotic and enticing locations, Paris and London. And this friend said to my mom, gee, you know, they keep saying that this conflict is going to be resolved, it's going to end. So what if you had Peter go to London for a while? And then once the thing's resolved, just have him come back. So he won't be here. It won't be easy to get him, you know, and hopefully it'll all be resolved and he can come back and, you know, the world will live in peace and harmony. So I think that Joanne, that was her name, Joanne Newman, I think she was thinking of a number of months, ideally. And as it turned out, I was in London for a year, not always in their apartment, but the really amazing thing about being there is, first of all, there was kind of a arts and culture explosion in London at that point. And there was also a blues boom, a British blues boom. And so that meant that you could actually go to a club and see Jeff Beck with Rod Stewart or Eric Clapton, or if you got lucky on the right night, Jimi Hendrix, or in my case, even more lucky, Peter Green's Fleetwood Mac was playing regularly in clubs. This is before they broke as a concert attraction in the United States, but they were playing basically bars. And it was early enough, I saw them early enough where it was a quartet. So that would have meant Peter Green, Jeremy Spencer, John McVie, and Mick Fleetwood. And that also meant that after Peter Green backed up Jeremy Spencer, for reasons I still don't understand, Jeremy Spencer would leave the stage. He didn't stay on stage and play piano or play guitar behind Peter Green. He left the stage. So it was a trio, Green, McVie, and Fleetwood. I was in a band that almost got signed.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that. I understand that you played at the Marquee Club one night.
I did. We opened for
Opening for
somebody.
Pink Floyd?
Well, not there, but we did open
Oh.
for them. It was a party, but we opened, I can't remember who we opened. I mean, it was probably, you know, midweek or something.
Who would you say your biggest influences are? Is it a combination of the British artist and the blues artist from America?
Well, what's interesting, that's an interesting question. What's really interesting about this whole thing, so I would have to say ultimately it was American geniuses who are the bedrock of it. I mean, I'm also lucky to have seen Skip James alive. I saw him at Wesleyan University, and that was riveting and also life-altering. So I can't really pick between, both really influential, but the root of it to me is still the American geniuses, because that's what the British greats were we're using as a template, if that makes any sense.
Sure. And then you come back to America.
Yes.
Tell our viewers about when you come back to America and your education of the blues.
So multiple facets of this. One is I had now seen a really high level right in front of me. And I didn't know how to get there, but I knew that it was humanly possible. You know, when I heard the records, I didn't know how, I couldn't see how that would be ever possible for me. Like I didn't even know what a scale was. But now having seen it, I realized, okay, I've got to see everybody that's living that I can get to. I've got to see them because there weren't instructional videos, there weren't concert videos. You had to go. There's a club run by a man named Lefty Foster. It's called the Shibu Inn. And he brought these geniuses and more to his club. You could go sit on the floor at Shibu and be this far away from Buddy Guy and Junior Wells, which I did multiple nights. And I did it with friends and we recorded it. And it is some of the greatest Buddy Guy I have ever heard. I picked up some of the tricks, one of which almost got me killed, though. Buddy Guy used to do this thing. I'm pretty sure he doesn't do it anymore, but where he would sing to a member of the crowd, and he might even go over to the table, but it would unfailingly be the most attractive woman in the crowd. And he could get away with it. He was Buddy Guy. I tried that once and almost got my, you know what. But and he also used to do the thing where he had a long table and he would run into the women's bathroom. It's also one you can't get away with very easily. He would also run outside. But so part of the education was going to see everybody I could.
Now, speaking of Buddy Guy,
yes,
I understand there's a story.
Yes.
Buddy Guy made a comment to you.
Well, he made a couple of comments to me.
Well, the one that stands out is you're as bad as Eric Clapton, and I know Eric Clapton. How did that remark come about?
Can I tell you the other one, though, before I tell you that one?
Sure.
Okay. So I used to go to Shibu and I used to sit this close, try to watch every single thing that Buddy Guy did, because I adore Buddy Guy. He is like a superhero to me.
One of my favorites.
Oh, I'm with you on that. And he and Junior Wells used to tour and used to come to this club in Connecticut on a regular basis. At the time, he had a Fender Bassman. I think that the tweed was coming off and there was contact paper on it to protect it. And I think, if I'm remembering correctly, this particular night, he had a Guild, one of the Starfires. I can't remember. It's the one that's a double cutaway. It's like a 335. He still does this, but at the time, he did it with different references. He would talk about how he learned, and then he would illustrate each artist. So he would do John Lee Hooker. He would do Jimmy Reed. He would do T-Bone Walker. He would do BB. So I don't know if he did this particular portion all the time, but he said, I'm going to show you how I learned. And whoever can guess the most artists, I'll buy him a drink. So he started Jimmy Reed, and I yelled out, Jimmy Reed, Eddie Taylor. He started Boogie Chill, and I yelled out, John Lee Hooker. He did beginning to a T-bone piece. I said, "Bone." He did absolutely perfect, spot on, sweet little angel. And I said, BB King. He said, "Get this little motherfucker out of here." I never got the drink. I never got the drink. That is a true story. How the other quote came about is when Night Stage opened in Cambridge, Mass. I was lucky to play there sometimes, and the people there were really nice to me. Anyway, Buddy and Junior came and they played Night Stage, which is a great venue, much lamented, no longer around. And so I went to see them. I went alone this particular night, and there was a pretty significant table, maybe a couple of tables, of people who were clearly all together. They had, friendly. Turned out they'd been traveling across the country. As they put it, "We've been following Buddy and Junior, and we've been partying the whole time." So, yeah. So I wanted to see them, like really see them, not be like way in the back. They said, "Hey, there's one extra seat here. You want to sit?" Yeah, of course. I want to be as close as I can get, right? So I'm still studying to this day. So I wanted to see Buddy as closely as I could. So played a great first set, and then Buddy Guy and Junior Wells go to the dressing room, and these people get up and they follow them because clearly they all know each other, because these guys have been following Buddy and Junior at least for across part of the country. And as they're leaving, one person says, "Hey, well, why don't you come with us? We do this basically every night. We go in the dressing room with them." So I don't know how you are when you meet your heroes. I tend to close up. I'm kind of introverted. I don't know what to say. I get tongue-tied. So we're in the dressing room, and they're partying. Buddy and Junior accept them in the dressing room like it's completely natural. But I kind of feel out of place. I don't really know these people at all. I mean, I sat at a table with them for a set. I would love to talk to Buddy and Junior, but I don't know them either. Even though I've seen them a bunch of times, I don't know them. And I'm not outward enough to like just go up and, start saying something. What would I say? You're one of my superheroes of the guitar. That I'd be done. That would be it. Right. So I normally, I'm going to say this, and I'm going to undercut myself right away. Normally, I would never do this out of respect. But there was a guitar leaning up against something. It was a white ESP Stratocaster. It must have been a backup because he didn't use it. At least he didn't use it, in the first set. And it's just kind of, sitting there, so to speak. And because I was nervous and because I felt out of place, the thing that calms me down is to play guitar. So I picked it up, and I was actually crouched down, and it was unplugged. It's a Stratocaster. It wasn't plugged into anything. And I was just playing on it, really, just playing a few figures on it. And I was amazed how great it felt. It's like, wow, and I know you shouldn't be doing this, but you're touching a guitar that belongs to Buddy Guy, right? So, and I look up, I was kind of in a trance, and I look up, and he's across the room doing this, and he's watching me. And he says that really amazingly beautiful thing. And I thought, I'm going to finally get to meet him. And then they, party kind of closed in and that was it. It was over. And I just kind of left. I left, I put the guitar back and made sure it was okay and left.
Did
It
you
was a
ever
very sweet
run?
thing for him to say.
Yeah.
I'm quite well aware that Eric Clapton's a genius, that I'm not in any way pretending that, you know what I mean? It's just, but when you're trying to, build up your name and somebody says something nice like that, hopefully he isn't too mad at me for using it.
Did you and Buddy Guy's paths cross at any point later in your career
Yes.
and that story come up?
No, it didn't come up. He played a really nice venue, a large venue here in Boston. And my friend David Herwald, who's a blues DJ and photographer, who had introduced me to several brilliant, legendary musicians, knew Buddy, and he got us backstage. And we hung out, but it didn't come up. And I didn't want to bring it up, but he couldn't have been sweeter.
I read that in the 1990s, you became the band leader for the Pine Top Perkins band.
Yeah, that's not quite accurate. I need to correct that. What happened is, that band 9 Below Zero, that was, the Boston band that was playing around, we made a record, and the guys who made that record had a financial interest in Synchro Sound, which was a studio owned by the Cars, if you remember the Cars,
Sure.
on Newbury Street in Boston. And these two guys were blues fanatics, and they wanted to make blues records. And so, which they did. And one of the great artists they wanted to work with was Pine Top Perkins. So they did sessions with Pine Top. And I don't know all the ins and outs of why, but they wanted something specific on a few songs. And the specific thing they wanted is they wanted the guitar to match or duplicate the piano figures that Pine Top would play. He had these signature moves that he would do. Things like that. And so the engineer said to me, would you have any interest in playing on a session on a Pine Top Perkins record? I was like, are you kidding? Yeah, but, I'm ready now. Let's go. He said, no. What I have to do is I have to give you 3 tracks. You have to learn all of the piano figures, like the signature moves, not the solos or any of that, but stuff where it would be appropriate to double it. We want you to try that. Okay, great. So they gave me 3 tracks, like rough mixes, learned them to the best of my ability, and then went in and recorded, and they liked it, which I was kind of shocked by. And they said, well, we'd like you to do some other ones. So I ended up playing on, part of this record. It's called On Top. It was released on Deluge Records, and then I think later it came out on maybe I-95 Records. I can't remember. Bill Hurley, I think, was involved with that label, but initially it was on Deluge. So they really seemed to like it. And so then, in support, I guess, of that record, Pine Top was going to come to the Northeast and he was going to tour. So they said, would you have any interest in playing with Pine? I'm like, yeah, like right now, let's go. Well, we need you to find a rhythm section. So yeah, I already know the guys. I know the guys. So anybody, this. I mean, it's Pine Top Perkins. I'm not the musical director. Pine Top Perkins is the musical director of Pine Top Perkins.
Right.
All it meant was they wanted me to collect the money in the clubs.
Okay.
Right?
Sure.
That was it.
You mentioned earlier that you saw Skip James,
Yes.
Lillian. Understand there was a
Yes.
lesson you learned from that show.
There were several lessons
And
I learned there.
what were those lessons, and how have those lessons influenced your playing style?
Well, first of all, I got to see Skip James in a beautiful uh, building on the Wesleyan University campus. There was no PA system. There was a piano in the room, and he had an acoustic guitar. So he was singing and playing into the air. There was no sonic support for what he was doing. And he was as riveting as you would imagine he would be. I mean, the songs themselves are incredible. But he was playing extremely well and singing beautifully. Unfortunately, the crowd was talking and walking around while he was playing. Now, if he had a PA system and a monitor, it might have felt a little different for him. But in a situation where it's just your voice and your acoustic guitar, and people are talking and they're walking around, it's distracting. But what became very clear is that he was self-consciously an artist. Like, he regarded what he did as an art form. He didn't, I mean, I'm sure he knew that he was entertaining people, but he was clearly presenting art, and he was aware of it in the moment that he was doing it, which was a profound lesson to me. That's where he was coming from, like a really deep and high artistic place. And he was delivering it. You know what I mean? He was actually delivering it. And this is a paraphrase, but it's pretty close. He said, Mr. Skip would appreciate it if you would stop conversing and perambulating when he is doing his art, which is actually quite beautifully said. And so he began again, and they kind of let him get through a number or two, and he started doing it all over again, except this time he didn't talk to him. He got up. He took his guitar, he got up, and he walked out of the room. And I don't know what they paid him to be there, but I would suspect it was it should have been a very handsome fee from a college at that time. And they had a heck of a time convincing him to come back. It took quite a while. He did come back. And he was fully aware that it was a liberal arts college and that it was, prestigious. At least that's the impression I had. He made a beeline for the piano. Didn't touch the guitar initially. Made a beeline for the piano. And he has a song called All Night Long. It's basically a variant of Rock Me Baby. And he played, there's no polite way to say this. He played whorehouse piano. That's the style he was playing. And he sang the filthiest version of that song that I believe has ever been played at Wesleyan University, and maybe anywhere outside of a juke. And he enjoyed the heck out of it. It was the first time all day that he smiled. So again, he was self-consciously artistic about it, and he was letting them know. He was letting all of us know, okay, if it's all night long, it was unbelievable to see. Played a few more numbers on the piano, played a couple more on the acoustic guitar, said goodnight, left. Um,
That's a cool
Now,
story.
one of the other lessons in it was delivering. It wouldn't have mattered if he couldn't deliver, but he could. You know what I mean? He was like on his own, one guy. And it was like having obviously a hell of a lot funkier probably, but like having an angel appear in your room. I mean, it was just like, where did this guy come from? Devil Got My Woman, Cypress Grove,
Yeah.
Hard Time Killing Floor. I mean, just those three songs alone, just unbelievable. And again, like fully able to convey the art, you know, really impressive. Vocally, instrumentally, artistically, and again, consciously so in the moment, like really aware. Okay, yeah, I am the shit, and here it is. You know what I mean? Like, wow, that's something to see. That's something to experience.
So
I loved it. I just fell in love with him. I
let's
wanted to
jump
just
to the
like go
21st
carry his
century.
bag.
Sorry, let's jump to the 21st century.
Oh, sure, yeah,
You released your debut album, Evolution. You have
yes,
Al Cooper and Ronnie Earl on this album.
yep.
How did it come about that you got those two cats to play on your album, on your debut album, no less?
Well, it's because of their kindness in both cases. Um, when I first moved to Boston, um, I went to a club, and the club was featuring blues, and it was Ronnie Earl, and he had Hubert Sumlin sitting in. I thought I had just gone to heaven. And Ronnie Earl is a mentor. You know, he was very kind to me. He would invite me up on stage. He would school me in certain things. He also introduced me to all kinds of amazing people. I met Albert Collins through him, Johnny Copeland, Wayne Bennett. Um, so we were doing this track, and I mean, he is a master of slow blues. You know, there's no other way to put it. He's a master of it. So I thought, well, if he'll do it, he's got to be on this song. And he was kind enough to do it. And with Al Cooper, um, he's actually been on two records of mine, which is shocking. And again, both times because of his kindness. In both cases, the producers knew him. But what's remarkable is, okay, I don't know. I don't know if you want to use this, but I'll tell you the story because it's the truth. In both cases, I tried to pay Al Cooper. He wouldn't take a dime from me. And what he said, this is a paraphrase, but it's pretty close. People pay me a lot of money, sometimes to play on really shitty stuff. And he said, I really liked this. You can't give me any money.
That's a great compliment.
Well, it was the truth. And yes, I get chills now thinking about it. He's a great, great person. He treated me fantastically well. I just hope he's okay physically and so forth. I know he has some physical challenges going on, but yeah, he's on Busted from Mathematics of Love as well.
Right. Speaking of that album, we jump ahead a decade.
Yes.
Mathematics of Love. And I want to read a quote that I read about this that some reviewer wrote. It says, "This isn't your typical run-of-the-mill blues record. What is it about this album, do you think, that makes it more than just a run-of-the-mill blues album?"
I know this is going to sound big-headed, and it's really not meant to be big-headed, but it is the truth. Not with evolution, because I wasn't really ready yet then, but from Mathematics of Love on, anytime I've been able to afford a record, to make a record, the goal has been every time to make a great record, if possible. And if we're not going to make a great record, we're not going to do a record. So first of all, it starts with the goal. But then beyond that, it's assembling a team of people, because I cannot do it myself. I have been lucky, blessed, you probably is more accurate, to have really great producers, tremendous bands, great engineers, great mastering engineers, tremendous PR people, great radio people. It takes all of that. But more specifically to your point, in each case with the producers, the material has been key, whether I wrote it or not. It's the quality of the material. Like when we did Mathematics of Love, Ted Drzdowski produced that. We sat and we went through every song that I had. I mean, every one. And Ted recommended a couple. And we made sure, as much as we could, that this is the best stuff you have to present at this time in your life, your career.
I understand you've described your music as soul guitar. Can you explain to our viewers what you mean by that?
It's actually quite simple. I am self-taught on guitar. So anything that I've been able to do, in part is through hard work, but it's generated, impelled, I guess you would say, by a soul desire, a desire to express, to reach out to people with the guitar. It's a way to communicate emotions, feelings, even thoughts that I might not be able to do verbally, or might not be able to do in any other way.
In 2017,
you
release Everybody Wants to Go to Heaven.
Yeah.
And on this record, you have a version of the Peter Green song, The World Keeps Turning.
Yes.
Now, it's got some interesting raw sound on it.
Yes.
I understand that you used various effects to create this raw sound. What were those effects that you used?
Well, we recorded most of it, except for the Spooner Oldham stuff, which we did at Fame. We recorded it in Marco's house. And his wife and young baby moved out while we were recording, which was probably wise because we weren't playing quietly. Because I had come from Boston, I wasn't able to bring amplifiers. So he worked with a incredible genius named Buddy Miller, who lent us amps. So we had a Swart Atomic Space Tone amp, and we had a Headstrong Little King, which is like a Princeton. One of these we put in the bathroom, and one we put in the living room. And I had for most of it, I had a Fender Stratocaster, although he had a couple of cool Epiphones that I played on some things. I had pretty modest pedal board, actually. I had a Strymon Flint, which is where some of the ambient sounds are coming from. That's just a trem and reverb pedal, but it's a really good one. And some of it was just winding the amps up, and some of it was, I had this pedal, it's called the Great Wide Open. Let's see if I can find it. I had it down here. I can't find it right now, but it lives up to its name. It sounds really good when you turn it all the way up. When it's wide open, it sounds amazing. This guy has made pedals for Mark Ford,
Okay.
who's a tone aficionado. And this particular pedal sounds really good. It sounded particularly good through those amplifiers if you wind it all the way up. You don't have to have your guitar full up. And kind of back your guitar down, kind of ride the volume and the dynamics from there.
You have the Blind Lemon Jefferson song, See That My Grave Is Kept Clean, on that album.
Yes.
And it's got a bit of a really non-traditional blues feel. I understand
Yes.
you use some kind of a backing track on that to get that sound.
What it was is Marco used to send me these really cool loops that he would make in his home studio, like to write to, like inspiration loops, basically. So I knew I wanted to do that song. A lot of people have done it, so it's a challenge to try to find a way to do it that hasn't already been done, you know? I'm not saying my version is the greatest thing since sliced bread, but just trying to find a different way into it. And so Ducky Carlisle was one of the engineers on this record, and he said, well, got any ideas? And I said, well, I got these cool loops that Marco sent me. What do you think? So he listened to him. He said, what if we take two of them and we put them together? And suddenly, like, it just created this unbelievable vibration, like these cool loops that were done in a kind of a, sonically adventurous way.
But then the last track on the album is May Clayton.
Yeah.
Like was that the 1920s or 1930s?
Yeah.
And it's a totally different style.
Yes.
It kind of goes back to that era.
Right.
How did you decide to pick that song for the album?
Well, it's funny you should say that, because Marco Trevino produced that record. So he had a number of suggestions. He had suggestions within the things that I wrote, and he had suggestions by other artists. And that was one of the ones we talked a lot about, the Mississippi Sheiks and music of that era, that it wasn't done as much, nowadays. It isn't kind of common currency. And we were going for that, like something different. It's also got a different vocal melody, which is really cool.
Well, that ends part one of my interview here with Peter Parcek. Join Peter and me for part two, where we pick up and discuss his latest album, Mississippi Suitcase, the story behind that song, his favorite curse word, and life in general. So I hope you'll join Peter and me for part two right here on Interview of the Blues.